Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Big Blue Sports Talk. I'm your host, Matt Voltz, a freshman here at SUNY Fredonia, here to talk sports, so we'll do just that today. We are a few minutes past the hour, about 2:07, and it's good to be back. First time in a couple weeks that we've been on the air doing Big Blue Sports Talk. So as always, we like to start off by talking about some Fredonia athletics, and Fredonia's men's basketball team, actually both teams were on the road taking on Oswego last night. The men's basketball team taking on the Lakers at 7:30 last night, a 79-60 loss to the Oswego Lakers last night. So the men's basketball team falling to 0-7 on the season. They are back at home on Friday night at 7:30 to take on SUNY Cortland, the Red Dragons coming to town. And they've actually had two games this weekend as they are heading up to Geneseo on Saturday for a 4 o'clock tip-off against the Knights of SUNY Geneseo. So for the women's basketball team, they were also on the road taking on Oswego last night. And the women's team, they have an overall record of 3-3 now on the season following a 76-66 loss to the Lakers last night. 5:30 on Friday, the women's basketball team is at home against SUNY Cortland, and then they'll head to Geneseo for a 2 o'clock tilt with the SUNY Geneseo Knights on Saturday afternoon. For ice hockey, for the Fredonia State Blue Devils men's team, season record of 1-6 at the moment. Their most recent game, they had a game not this past Saturday, but the week before, November 19th. They were up in Potsdam, a 3-2 loss to the Bears of SUNY Potsdam. Two games this weekend for Fredonia at home against SUNY Brockport at 7 o'clock on Friday night, and then a Saturday night, 7 p.m. puck drop at Geneseo. So that is a look at your basketball and hockey outlooks for Fredonia State. Of course, as we always like to start with the SUNY Fredonia sports, then talk about some sports that are going on around the NFL, NHL, MLB, and NBA. And then we close it out by talking about the Sabres and the Bills. And, of course, it's a big week for Buffalo sports with the Sabres in action tonight at 7 o'clock, heading to Detroit to take on the Red Wings. Sabres also playing tomorrow night. They will host the Colorado Avalanche, the defending Stanley Cup champions, coming to town at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. The Bills also have a Thursday night football game as the Bills and Sabres are playing on the same night. So for fans of both teams, good luck as the Bills kick off at 8:15 in Foxborough against the New England Patriots. First matchup between Buffalo and New England this season. Remember, the two teams split last year. They had that weird Monday night game in Orchard Park that was like half of a monsoon, and the Patriots only threw the ball 3 times and ended up beating Buffalo. And then they met in Week 16 last year up in Foxborough, a game that the Bills won and was probably one of their most complete games of the season last year from at least an outsider perspective. So as we take a look at sports going on, and we first want to talk about some sporting news, and we'll get to the Bills and Sabres in a second. There was actually a news story that broke about an hour ago that Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman Chris Letang is now out indefinitely after suffering a stroke on Monday. The Penguins have said that Chris Letang is not experiencing any long-lasting or life-altering effects. However, he is definitely out for the foreseeable future, and obviously we all, in the hockey community and the sports community as a whole, we all wish the best to Chris Letang and hope that he recovers okay. And even, because that's worrisome. That is not, that's something that is very scary and can have long-lasting effects. And obviously, it's very good news to see that Chris Letang does not appear to have necessarily life-threatening impacts from that, but still definitely a very scary situation for the Penguins, and we all hope the best for Chris Letang. In more local sports news, of course, the Sabres in action tonight against the Detroit Red Wings. Ilya Lyubushkin and Rasmus Asplund are out of the lineup. Lyubushkin is out because he blocked a shot in Monday night's loss to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Rasmus Asplund also out of the lineup. Vinny Hinostroza will be rotated in for Asplund, and he will be on a line with Casey Middlestat and Victor Olofsson. As Ilya Lyubushkin comes out of the lineup on the defense, Lawrence Pilot will play for him. And I know a lot of Some Buffalo fans are definitely kind of frustrated that Peyton Krebs is not getting an opportunity, and guys such as Hinostroza or maybe even somebody like Casey Middlestat are getting opportunities, and Krebs is not. And I think Don Granato really just wants to rotate these guys in and out. However, Peyton Krebs, again, tonight is not in the lineup, and that is not, at least to our knowledge, that is not an injury concern. That is just a result of the forward lines kind of being rotated. If we're looking at what we expect to see on the ice tonight for Buffalo, it's probably safe to assume that we're going to see Jeff Skinner, Tage Thompson, and Alex Tuch on the top line. They've played really well together. And another line that's played very well together, the young guns of J.J. Peterka, Dylan Cousins, and Jack Quinn on that second line. Those guys have played quite well. And I really felt that the other night, that fourth line that the Sabres had Monday night against the Lightning of Tyson Jost, Zemgus Girgensons, and Kyle Okposo, I thought that fourth line really did a good job as well. However, some concerns with the Sabres starting to emerge as far as defensive depth is concerned, especially outside of guys like Dahlin, Power, and Samuelson, and the forward depth really outside of the top two lines of Skinner, Thompson, Tuch, and Peterka, Cousins, and Quinn. However, the Sabres, I wouldn't be surprised to see the same general lineup. Don Granato has not named a starting goaltender for tonight's game yet. I would expect that we would probably see, because the Sabres have a back-to-back. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen played on Monday. I would expect to see one of them tonight and the other tomorrow. I can't imagine they would play the same goaltender back-to-back nights. Not sure who we'll see tonight, if Don Granato will throw out Luukkonen tonight, or if, because Luukkonen just played on Monday, he'll send out Craig Anderson. Not too sure about that. No word on when Eric Comrie is going to be back either. That's obviously hopefully soon, because that was definitely a major impact to the Sabres' goaltending depth. I mean, they had to call up Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen from Rochester, and he's been up and down, right? You know, he kind of struggled on Monday night against the Lightning. It was a game that the Sabres took the lead, the Sabres were struck down at first. I mean, my goodness, you blink and they were down 2-0, and then right after that, Buffalo rebounded with Tage Thompson and Jack Quinn scoring, and then it was kind of game on from there. And it was very tight, a lot of scoring. Buffalo ends up falling 6-5 in overtime in that game, and we will get to more on that later. But first, let's take a look at the scores from around the sports leagues, and we'll take a look because we actually have 2 weeks of NFL games that we were not here for. So this is 2 weeks ago, Week 11 on Thursday night. You had Tennessee going to Green Bay and beating the Packers 27-17. Then those Sunday's games, the Bills with the game moved up to Detroit due to the weather. Buffalo beats the Cleveland Browns 31-23. The Falcons get a 27-24 win over the Chicago Bears. The Philadelphia Eagles take down the Indianapolis Colts 17-16. In a very low-scoring game in Foxborough, the Patriots beating the Jets 10-3. And, of course, that one was notable because the Patriots returned a punt on one of the last plays of the game to win that game. It was a 3-3 game. Jets quarterback Zach Wilson did not have a good game. Can't sugarcoat that. He did not play well at all. And he only threw for 77 yards in that game. And in his post-game press conference, he was asked if he took responsibility for it. He was asked by a reporter, I believe it was, they asked him, did you let down the defense or something to that effect? And without thinking, he goes, no. And that's it's a little problematic when you've got quarterbacks who, and I'm not trying to, pick on Zach Wilson or anything, but it's a tad problematic when you have a quarterback who is not outright taking accountability for his own poor performance. I mean, you look at Josh Allen. He had the game against, I believe it was after the Minnesota game, or maybe it was after the Jets game, I think it might have been, when they asked him how he felt about his performance in his post-game press conference, and he said, it's hard to win when your quarterback plays like fill in the blank. That kind of accountability goes a long way, and the Bears were kind of going through the same thing, too. We saw Justin Fields had a rough game, and Justin Fields apologized to his entire team in the locker room, and there were guys that stopped in mid-apology, and they were like, Justin, this is on all of us. We appreciate your accountability, but this is on all of us. We got your back. And that's kind of refreshing to see, as opposed to now you've got the Jets with Zach Wilson getting benched last week and Mike White playing well. You've got a couple of Jets players accidentally, and I use air quotations around the word accidentally there, liking tweets that were critical of Zach Wilson. And you've also now got the problem of him not taking the accountability of his own poor performance. And it's kind of a similar thing that's going on in Denver too. I mean, you've got Russell. I mean, boy, that is a whole nother topic. I could probably spend another hour talking about the absolute mess that the Denver Broncos are right now. And I know a thing or two about sports organizations that are absolute messes. I'm a Buffalo Sabres fan after all. Anyways, other NFL scores, the Saints beating the Rams. I'm sorry, I had to get that dig in on the Sabres. The Saints beating the Rams 27-20. The Lions was their third win in a row, going to New Jersey and beating the Giants 31-18. The Baltimore Ravens in a low-scoring game beat the Carolina Panthers 13-3. The Commanders get a 23-10 win over the Houston Texans. The Raiders beat the Broncos 22-16 in overtime on a walk-off touchdown pass from Derek Carr to Devontae Adams. The Cowboys steamroll the Vikings 40-3 in Minnesota. Yikes. The Bengals beating the Steelers 37-30. On Sunday Night Football that week, the Chiefs beating the Chargers 30-27. That was kind of a late game thriller. And then the Monday night game, the 49ers blow out the Cardinals 38-10. Last week's scores, because remember, we got 2 games to cover. We were off for a week. On Thanksgiving, the Bills probably gave everyone in the Western New York area significantly more heart palpitations than they would have gotten just after Thanksgiving dinner. However, the Bills do hang on and do get the win, and people can say, well, it wasn't a pretty win. A win's a win is a win is a win. The Bills beat the Lions 28-25 to improve to 8-3 on the season. The second game, the Cowboys hold off a late charge and beat the Giants 28-20. And the Vikings, in a great game, beat the Patriots 33-26. And, of course, the Patriots hosting the Bills tomorrow night. And that game, as a quick reminder, in the Buffalo metro area, so in Western New York, that game is being carried on Channel 7, WKBW. However, outside of the Buffalo market, that game can only be watched on Amazon. Their local channels in Buffalo and Boston are televising those games. However, outside of those 2 markets, you have to watch it on Amazon. It is free on Amazon. But a lot of people up in the Rochester area are saying, what about us? And, well, unfortunately. But here in Fredonia, to my knowledge, we should have it on Channel 7. And again, that game kicking off at 8:15 tomorrow night. Bills at Patriots. Other games last week on Sunday, we had another overtime thriller. The Browns coming back to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 23-17 in overtime. And the overall question is, does anybody want to win the NFC South? Because holy cow. The Bengals beating the Tennessee Titans 20-16 in a rematch of last year's AFC divisional round game. The Dolphins beat the Texans 30-15, although Houston made not necessarily a super tight game, but Houston made somewhat of a game out of it in the fourth quarter. The Jets behind Mike White dominate the Chicago Bears 31-10. Commanders get a 19-13 win over the Atlanta Falcons. The Carolina Panthers take down the Denver Broncos 23-10, and Denver's going, oh boy. The Jacksonville Jaguars, probably the upset of the week. The Jacksonville Jaguars, on a last-minute drive, Trevor Lawrence with no timeouts drives Jacksonville down the field. They were down by 7. Jacksonville scores a touchdown. It was Trevor Lawrence throwing a touchdown pass to Marvin Jones. And then Doug Peterson, in true Doug Peterson fashion, decides, you know what? No, we're not kicking the extra point. We're going for 2. And they went for it. Trevor Lawrence to the former Buffalo Bills, Zay Jones. Jacksonville wins 28-27 in probably, I would say, the upset of the week. Other games, the Chargers beating the Cardinals 25-24. That was a close game, and the Chargers came back in the fourth quarter to win that too. The Raiders, for the second week in a row, win an overtime game. They beat the Seahawks in Seattle 40-34. That was Josh Jacobs ripped off an 86-yard run to win it in overtime. The Chiefs beat a injured Ram and very badly injured Rams team 26-10. The 49ers shut out the Saints 13-0. On Sunday Night Football, high-scoring game in Philadelphia with the Eagles keep flying high and beat the Packers 40-33. And on Monday Night Football, the Steelers head into Indianapolis and beat the Colts 24-17. So your upcoming games this week, as we talked about, Bills-Patriots tomorrow night at 8:15. Buffalo enters that game as a 3.5-point favorite. Sunday's games, the Steelers taking on the Falcons in Atlanta. This is in the 1 o'clock window. The Packers-Bears rivalry renewed as those two teams meet in Chicago. A suddenly red-hot Jacksonville team takes on a very solid-looking Detroit Lions team in Detroit. The Minnesota Vikings hosting the New York Jets. That one could be very interesting because the question, at least at midweek, is who starts for the Jets? Do you go back to Zach Wilson or do you hand the keys to Mike White again? NFC East battle as the New York Giants host the Washington Commanders in a battle of two teams that have really played above expectations this year. The Philadelphia Eagles hosting the Tennessee Titans. The Baltimore Ravens play host to the Denver Broncos. Broncos are 3-8, looking to get out of this losing slump they've been in. The Texans hosting the Cleveland Browns, and that game, of course, is notable because Deshaun Watson is set to make his Browns debut on Sunday in Houston against his former team, the Texans, in a scheduling that was definitely not deliberate in any way, shape, or form by the NFL to generate ratings. In the 4:05 slate, a couple games at 4:05, the Rams hosting the Seahawks and the 49ers hosting the Miami Dolphins as Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel returns to San Francisco, the team where he was the offensive coordinator for a handful of years. The Chiefs go to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals in a 4:25 game. The Chargers head out to Vegas to take the Raiders at the same time as well. Sunday Night Football, 8:20 on NBC. The Dallas Cowboys playing host to the Indianapolis Colts. And then on Monday Night Football, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the New Orleans Saints. So that's a look at your NFL scores. Now let's take a look at what's going on in the NHL. Of course, as we know, the Sabres in Detroit against the Red Wings tonight. Let's take a look at some scores of last night. The Boston Bruins beating the Tampa Bay Lightning 3-1. The San Jose Sharks ride into Montreal and shut out the Canadiens 4-0. Carolina Hurricanes beating the Pittsburgh Penguins 3-2 in overtime. Thanks to an overtime winner by defenseman Brett Pesce. The Philadelphia Flyers beat the New York Islanders 3-1. A 2-1 overtime win for the Nashville Predators over the Anaheim Ducks as Roman Josi scores to win it. The Winnipeg Jets blank the Colorado Avalanche 5-0. The Calgary Flames take down the Florida Panthers 6-2. The Washington Capitals beat the Vancouver Canucks 5-1, and in the wildest game of the night, the Seattle Kraken and the Los Angeles Kings combined for 17 goals. Andrei Burakovsky wins it in overtime for Seattle. They beat the LA Kings 9-8 in overtime. Anybody want to play goaltender in that one? 4 games tonight, 3 7 o'clock games, and then 1 9:30 puck drop. Of course, the Sabres in Detroit to take on the Red Wings, and it should be noted that tonight's game is actually nationally televised on TNT. I don't know if it's on MSG or not, but it is going to be on TNT. And then Thursday night's game will be on the regular MSG programming. Other 7 o'clock games, the Rangers heading to Ottawa to take on the Ottawa Senators. The San Jose Sharks head up to Toronto to take on the Red Hot Leafs. And at 9:30 tonight on TNT, following the conclusion of the Sabres-Red Wings game, the Edmonton Oilers travel into Chicago to take on the Blackhawks. And as we look at the standings in the Atlantic Division, the Sabres sitting in a not great position. Buffalo's in 7th place out of 8 teams, 9-12-1 for 19 points. Buffalo right now, if we look at the wild card standings, the Sabres currently sit 7 points out of a playoff spot. You know, they right now, if the season ended right now, it would be Boston, Toronto, and Tampa in the Atlantic. It would be New Jersey, the Islanders, and Carolina in the Metro. And then Detroit and Pittsburgh would be your wild card teams, with the Rangers and the Florida Panthers just barely on the outside looking in. In the Western Conference, you'd have Dallas, Winnipeg, and Colorado making it in the Central, Vegas, Seattle, and LA in the Pacific. And then the wild cards would be the Oilers and Flames, with the Minnesota Wild, Nashville Predators, and St. Louis Blues just on the outside looking in. So Buffalo, obviously, you know, it was a tough loss the other night when the Sabres fell to the Tampa Bay Lightning on Monday night. It was a game that Buffalo had a 5-3 lead, and then Tampa got a couple goals late, and the Lightning ended up scoring in overtime. And again, we'll get to Monday night's game in a little bit, but it just comes down to Sabres are a young team. They're a little bit inexperienced, and that's a game that you'd like to win. That overall, that's a game that you'd like to win. But let's take a look at NBA scores. Then we're going to take a quick break and be right back to talk about that Sabres game as well as preview tonight's game against the Detroit Red Wings. So 3 NBA games last night. The New York Knicks with 140 points. They take down the Detroit Pistons 140-110. I love that because I'm a Knicks fan. The Dallas Mavericks beating the Golden State Warriors 116-113. And the LA Clippers taking down the Portland Trail Blazers 118-112. Handful of games going on in the NBA tonight at 7 o'clock tonight. 2 games at 7 o'clock. The Cleveland Cavaliers hosting the Philadelphia 76ers and the Orlando Magic playing host to the Atlanta Hawks. 7:30 tonight, Knicks at home against the Milwaukee Bucks. The Boston Celtics at 17-4 hosting the Miami Heat. That one on NBA TV. And the Brooklyn Nets also playing host to the Washington Wizards. A couple 8 o'clock games tonight. The Minnesota Timberwolves playing host to the Memphis Grizzlies. The New Orleans Pelicans hosting the Toronto Raptors. The Oklahoma City Thunder are taking on the San Antonio Spurs. 9 o'clock, we got 3 9 o'clock games. The Denver Nuggets hosting the Houston Rockets. Phoenix Suns playing host to the Chicago Bulls. And the Utah Jazz hosting the Los Angeles Clippers. 10 o'clock tonight, the Sacramento Kings play host to the Indiana Pacers. And the final game of the night, 10:30 on NBA TV, the LA Lakers hosting the Portland Trail Blazers. So that's a look at your around the league's sports scores. We will play just a little bit of music for you, and then we'll be right back to talk Buffalo Sabres. So the song we're about to play for you is quite fitting, I think, for the day that's going on, although I should have factored in the wind. This song is called Rainy Day Man, which makes sense because it was absolutely pouring here in Fredonia earlier today, although perhaps it definitely makes sense, too, to include the wind in there because, holy cow, on the way to the studio, I thought I was going to fall over. The wind was going to knock me over. So this is Rainy Day Man by Joey Molland. We will be right back to talk Buffalo Sabres. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports Talk this afternoon.
Telling me goodbye. I'm just an old umbrella. You keep around. Like all the other fellas, you fool around. Wearing all of your hair. I'm just your rainy day man.
You can't get enough of WCVF 88.9, can you? Well, in that case, you should check us out on the Fredonia Radio YouTube channel. We upload some of our weekly shows as well as some exclusive content. Listen to the new stuff as well as the old. Search Fredonia Radio on YouTube and subscribe now.
And this is WCVF, the campus and community voice of Fredonia.
So the Sabres, they played Monday night at home against the Tampa Bay Lightning. In a word to describe this game, I'd have to say eventful, interesting. It was something. It was something. Sabres fall 6-5 to the Tampa Bay Lightning in a game that seemingly in the beginning of the game, it looked like it was going to be an absolute mess for the Sabres. Not in the sense that they were playing poorly necessarily, but the problem was it was just they made two mistakes the entire game, the entire first period, rather. They made seemingly two mistakes, and both went into the back of the net. You know, there was midway through the first period, I really felt like the Sabres did a good job of pushing the pace for most of this game. And then Buffalo makes one mistake. They take a penalty. And then on the ensuing power play, Braden Point scores from Nikita Kucherov and Brandon Hagel to put the Lightning up 1-0. And that is a major concern that a lot of people have with the Sabres right now. Their penalty kill is one of the worst in the league. That's not an exaggeration from a frustrated Sabres fan either. That is true. Their penalty kill is statistically one of the worst in the NHL. And it was not exactly impressive on Monday night. Every Tampa Bay scored on every power play they had, which you cannot go 0 for 3 on the penalty kill and expect to win a game. That's especially against a team that has gone to the Stanley Cup Finals 3 years in a row and won 2 of those cups. You know, you can't go 0 for 3 on the penalty kill and expect to win hockey games. That's just, you can't do that. Just the same as you can't give up 6 goals and expect to win hockey games. And I know one was in overtime, but bear with me. Then it was later in the period. Again, Buffalo, I felt like was doing a good job of pushing the pace. And then they made one mistake. They couldn't get out of their D zone. And Corey Perry makes them pay. It was a backside goal that snuck by Luukkonen. Steven Stamkos had the assist. So it was 2-0 Tampa with about 3 minutes left in the first. And every single Sabres fan, myself included, was going, oh boy, this is not great. And then Tage Thompson became Tage Thompson. So about a minute after that, there was a puck battle in the corner, and Tage Thompson takes the puck and makes just 1, 2, or 3 remarkable moves and totally dangles around Ryan Elliott and tucks it into the side of the net to put Buffalo on the board. And that really seemed to get the guys going. You know, that seemed to kind of make everybody think, okay, maybe we can do this. And then about a minute after that, so we're talking with a little over a minute and 7 seconds left in the first period, Sabres get a rush coming down the wing, and Peterka finds Jack Quinn in the slot, and a quick shot by Jack Quinn just beats Elliott and ties the game. So it's 2-2 after 1, and now the Sabres fans are thinking, you know what? Okay, I feel a little bit better about this game than I did when it was 2-0. Hard not to. When we get to the second, that is also kind of where the same deal, I feel like Buffalo was doing a good job of pushing the pace. And it remained 2-2 for quite a while, and then midway through the frame, Tyson Jost, who, of course, the Sabres just picked up on waivers, a week and a half ago or something like that? Tyson Jost on Buffalo's fourth line gets a goal with an assist from Kyle Okposo and Zemgus Girgensons, and now it's 3-2 Buffalo. Then a little bit later, I believe it was on a power play. Yes, it was. Buffalo takes a penalty. Tampa Bay answers back. Braden Point scores his second power play goal of the game, gets assists from Nikita Kucherov and Mikhail Sergachev, and the Lightning tied at 3 with about 3.5 minutes to go in the second. And it was 3-3 after 2. And then the third period happens. And in the third, again, at first, Buffalo is far and away the better team. You know, we got about midway through the frame, Dylan Cousins gets a goal from Dahlin and Samuelson to put the Sabres up 4-3. It was a huge goal, a great shot by Cousins, with a beautiful wrist shot that just snuck by Elliott. And then a few minutes later, Jeff Skinner scores from Tage Thompson and Alex Tuck, that top line working together beautifully again. Everyone in KeyBank Center is singing Whitney Houston. There's 5 minutes to go. It's 5-3 Buffalo, and everyone is loving it. I guess just 6 minutes to go. And then Tampa comes back. Not even a minute. And not even close to a minute. 19 seconds after, I believe it was 19 seconds or something to that effect, after Skinner's goal, Steven Stamkos answers right back for the Tampa Bay Lightning with a goal assisted by Alex Killorn and Mikhail Sergachev. So now that cuts it to 5-4. And that, again, is another thing that the Sabres really, I think, need to improve upon, is a lot of times I think they score a goal and then they get so ahead of themselves, they're thinking, well, we got to score again. And then they make mistakes and they get ahead of themselves and they get jittery and they give up goals. It's the same thing that they have been doing in the, first couple minutes of a period or the last couple minutes of a period. They get jittery, they get antsy, they make mistakes, they give up goals. And you just can't do that when you're a young team with a young goaltender. So it's 5-4 Buffalo for a while. And then something interesting happens with about 4.5 minutes to go. So Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen had grabbed the puck and was holding on to it for a face-off. And then Nikita Kucherov, who in the past has been known to lay some less than clean hits. Kucherov, whether you want to make the argument that Kucherov was pushed into Luukkonen by Rasmus Dahlin, or whether you want to make the argument that Kucherov drove into the goaltender himself, either way, there was contact between Kucherov and Luukkonen. Rasmus Dahlin took exception and dived onto the pile, and as Rick Jenneret once said, we got a Pier 6 brawl. So it wasn't necessarily quite the brawl. It did not rival 2007 against Ottawa. There was no, there was no, Marty Baron was not out there fighting and trying to figure out how to take his gloves off. Andrew Peters was not beating up the opposing goaltender, and Chris Drury was not injured. It was not anything like that. But both Dahlin and Kucherov ended up going to the box for 2. And on the 4-on-4, that was mostly killed off. And then Tyson Jost gets called for a hook, which Sabres fans were not very happy with the call. Whether you think it was a good call or it was a bad call, regardless of what you thought about that specific call, the Sabres have done that a few times where they've been on the power play and they take penalties. You can't take penalties when you're on the power play. I mean, you can't do that. You're supposed to be scoring when you're on the power play. And the Sabres have done a good job of that. They have their power play is it's top 10 in the NHL. You can't take penalties when you're on the power play. That's just nonsensical. It's absurd. Why are you taking penalties when you're on the power play? First of all, you should be controlling the puck in the offensive zone, so you shouldn't even need to take a penalty. That's problem 1. Problem 2 is should not be taking penalties. I mean, stay out of the box, regardless. Might help when you have one of the worst penalty kills in the league. But it also might help to not take penalties when you're on the power play. And Buffalo goes to the box, and like clockwork, the Lightning score again. Brandon Hagel, who, take a wild guess what organization Brandon Hagel started with. Yeah, it was Buffalo. It was Buffalo. That was another wasted talent by Jason Botterill. That was another one where he said, "Oh, this guy's not gonna be too good," and then he let him go, and Hagel becomes very good in Chicago. As was per usual with Botterill acquiring the wrong players, and I was thinking about that last night, and I don't mean to go on a side tangent, but I'm definitely going to. I was thinking about just the Sabres' last handful of general managers. I was thinking about especially Tim Murray and Jason Botterill. I was thinking about, okay, Jason Botterill, in my mind, made 2 good moves. He made the trade. He traded Alex Nylander for Henry Jokiharju. Yoki Haru is not necessarily a top pair defenseman by any means, but he's a solid guy. And that was a trade that I think I think that trade definitely worked out in Buffalo's favor. And the O'Reilly trade, while most of the O'Reilly trade was a complete and utter disaster, at least he got Tage Thompson out of it. I mean, he had nothing to do with Tage Thompson becoming successful in Buffalo, but at least he got Tage Thompson out of it. So I guess it's not the worst deal that could have ever been made. And I know that some people might say, well, he drafted Rasmus Dahlin. He did all the, okay, yeah, he drafted Rasmus Dahlin. You could have picked somebody off the street and they would have picked Rasmus Dahlin. He didn't, and it's the same case I made with Tim Murray, because the main point about this is, can anybody tell me anything, a really good move that Tim Murray made? Because I can't really think of too many. I mean, people are going to make the argument, oh, he drafted Sam Reinhart. He drafted Jack Eichel. He lucked into those guys. He didn't. Getting Reinhart or Eichel wasn't a product of some genius maneuvering by the general manager. It was a product of building a team so terrible that they finished last place in the league back-to-back years. And you lost the draft lottery, so you ended up with pick number 2. And in 2015, again, like I say, any random person would have taken Jack Eichel with that pick. Any random person probably would have taken Sam Reinhart second overall in 2014 too. So I can't really credit that, because that's a no-brainer. That's an obvious one. And that has nothing to do with being a savvy general manager. That has everything to do with building a terrible team. But that's neither here nor there. But I got thinking about some of the moves that Tim Murray made. And, I thought he made the trade which brought Ryan O'Reilly to Buffalo, first of all. And I actually still think that was a good move. I still think that was a good move. That was like his one, in my mind, really good move. He also, on that same 2015 draft day, traded the 21st overall pick for Robin Lehner and David Legwand. Keep in mind, that was a very loaded draft. The next 3 players that went after pick number 21, Ilya Samsonov, Brock Besser, Travis Konechny. Those are 3 pretty solid players. Are they Hall of Famers? No, but they're solid players. I mean, I never disagreed with acquiring Lehner. I was happy with the move for Lehner because he was a good, solid goaltender, but he was a backup. That's the point of it. He was a backup goaltender. No backup goaltender should cost the 21st overall pick. I'm sorry. I really don't think that you needed to trade the 21st overall pick for a goaltender. I mean, keep in mind, he had 3 draft picks in the first round in 2015, which was a loaded class, and he traded 2 of them. And the Evander Kane trade that brought him from Winnipeg to Buffalo was a whole nother ordeal, which was bad for so many reasons besides just acquiring Evander Kane. It was also the fact that you traded the foundational piece of your defense in Tyler Myers. You traded your captain for the second year in a row. You traded a couple good prospects in Joel Armia and Brendan Lemieux, who have ended up becoming solid NHLers, and you traded a first-round pick. A rebuilding team should probably not be trading a first-round pick for win-now players. I just had that kind of thought. But anyways, I digress. That was several years ago. This is now. Anyways, thanks for joining me on that little TED Talk tangent. I was thinking about that yesterday. That's been in my head literally all day, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So it's 5-5 after that power play goal, and we go to overtime. And again, Buffalo gets a couple decent shots in overtime. They make one mistake, and Steven Stamkos buries it past Jukka-Pekka Luukkonen for a 6-5 overtime win. And I kept saying, man, that's the type of game that you really want to win. Imagine the statement. If Buffalo could have held on when it was 5-3 and held on to the regulation win, you just beat the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's a great statement for your team. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. Sabres have another chance to redeem themselves. They're in Detroit against the Red Wings, and the Red Wings are a team that they've played well. They had a really, really hot start, cooled off a little bit, but they've played well this season. As of right now, Detroit is in a playoff spot, and they've got some young talent. They've got guys like Lucas Raymond, Philip Zadina, Moritz Snyder. They've got some young talent on that Detroit team. It's a tough team. Playing the Red Wings is not a cakewalk, for sure. And Buffalo's got a really tough game tomorrow night when the defending Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche come to town. That's going to be a difficult one. But the Sabres, so let's just take a look at what Buffalo's upcoming schedule looks like outside of their next 2 games. So the Sabres, of course, as we know, are in Detroit tonight to take on the Red Wings. Tomorrow night at home against the Colorado Avalanche. And then Buffalo on Sunday. They actually have a Sunday night 7 o'clock game at home against the San Jose Sharks. Next Wednesday night, they'll be in Columbus to take on the Blue Jackets. Friday, December 9th, they will host the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then Saturday, December 10th, they will actually head to Pittsburgh to take on the Penguins. So they got a home and home Friday and Saturday of next week. So Buffalo's got some interesting matchups in the next 2 weeks. They've got some interesting games. There's the chance really for Buffalo to make an impact, but it's a tough schedule. You're playing some good teams. You're playing Colorado. You're playing a Pittsburgh team who is doing reasonably well this year. You're playing a Sharks team that's played well as of late. And you're playing a Red Wings team that's also played well as of late. So basically the Sabres are hoping to rebound and get back on track as they get set to play the Red Wings again. That game is a 7 o'clock puck drop tonight, and that is also on TNT. That one, I would assume, is probably not on MSG. That game on TNT tonight, so make sure you tune in to watch the Sabres take on the Detroit Red Wings. So we will take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll wrap our show up talking about the Bills, talking about last Thursday's game against the Detroit Lions, a little bit about the Sunday game against the Cleveland Browns as well, just about where the injury report is and where things stand for healthy players going into tomorrow night's game against the Patriots. So we'll play a little bit of music, and then we'll be right back. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports Talk.
Bombs at my feet, I was in too deep. I could barely breathe, I wanna believe. I can hear the sirens in the distance. Fire girls can really make a mess. Burning down the path of most resistance. It's a battleground, you better watch your step. Girl, you better watch your step. I've been twisted and conflicted with forgiveness. A heavy heart needs to find some rest. And the greatest prize
Hey, thanks for listening to WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. Stay tuned for more music, news, and entertainment.
Welcome back to Big Blue Sports Talk, and before we get going to finish our show today with the Bills, we want to read our weekly Grapevine announcement, and this is about a Records Artist Showcase. So on December 3rd, which is, what day? That's Saturday. This Saturday, experience indie, underground rap, R&B, and experimental rock all in one night at the Hail Fredonia Showcase. The event features a first-rate, homegrown lineup of 4 local acts. Witness the best of Western New York talent at the Cave in Buffalo, located at 71 Military Road in Buffalo. The community-based event features an eclectic roster of Orange Dog Club, Oh Summer Days, Prill, and Yellow Thumper. Handpicked by upper-class music industry majors, these up-and-comers are ready to prove their own while soundtracking the SUNY Fredonia semester. Doors open at 7 p.m. while music starts at 8 o'clock. The admission price is $10 at the door. This event is being put on by Hail Fredonia Records. Hail is an upper-level music industry course devoted to working directly with unsigned artists while giving back to the Western New York community. So make sure to head up to Buffalo on Saturday to check out the Hail Fredonia Showcase. All right, before we get going about the Bills, we want to talk about our This Day in Sports History, as always. And this was actually an interesting one. So we got a double feature again with a local one and a national one. So November 30th, 1988, which is 34 short years ago today, the Sabres beating the Quebec Nordiques 6-2 at the Old Odd behind 3-point nights from Doug Bodger and Pierre Turgeon. Buffalo had 6 different goal scorers that night. And also on this day in sports history, this is not a Buffalo thing, but for any listeners who might not be aware, my favorite college football team is the Auburn Tigers. And on this day, 9 years ago, the Auburn Tigers made a young Matt very happy when on November 30th, 2013, Auburn defeated the top-ranked Alabama Crimson Tide in the Iron Bowl behind a 109-yard missed kick return touchdown by senior defensive back Chris Davis. That's right, the kick six was 9 years ago today. And, of course, that has nothing to do with Buffalo, but it's a very famous moment in recent sports history, so I felt that I absolutely had to mention it. Plus, shout out to my Auburn Tigers, of course, because this past weekend was a little bit rough with the Iron Bowl on Saturday. So we finish our show, as we always do, talking about the Bills. And the Bills, as I mentioned before, gave us a little bit of a scare on Thanksgiving, but they hold off the Detroit Lions for a 28-25 win. Buffalo with 2 wins in a row in Detroit. The Bills improving to 8-3 on the season. Detroit drops to 4-7 after having won 3 in a row. Detroit actually scored first. Jamal Williams, who leads the league in touchdowns right now. I believe he still does. He did at the time of the game. Jamal Williams had a 2-yard touchdown run to start things off before Josh Allen found Isaiah McKenzie for a 19-yard touchdown pass. 7-7 at the end of the first quarter. In the second quarter, Allen runs it in from 3 yards out to give the Bills a 14-7 lead. But then the Lions answer back late in the half with a 1-yard touchdown pass from Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Lions tied at 14 before a Tyler Bass 47-yard field goal at the end of the half gives Buffalo a 17-14 lead. In the third quarter, Ed Oliver cements his AFC Defensive Player of the Week honors, which he received yesterday, by sacking Jared Goff in the end zone for a safety and putting Buffalo up 19-14. The Lions come back on their first drive of the fourth quarter, and Jared Goff finds DJ Chark for a 1-yard touchdown. DeAndre Swift runs it in for a 2-point conversion to put the Lions up by 3, 22-19. With 2 minutes and 40 seconds to go, the Bills drive down the field, and Josh Allen finds Stephon Diggs for a 5-yard touchdown. However, Tyler Bass misses the extra point. It's a 3-point game, 25-22 Buffalo. 23 seconds left. Michael Badgley connects from 51 yards out to tie the game at 25. And then a legendary drive by Josh Allen with a couple of key passes. And Tyler Bass sinks a 45-yard field goal for the 28-25 win. Bills improved to 8-3. The Bills are 8-3 at this point in the year, which is the same record that they had at this point in the year in both 2019 and 2020. Last year at this time, I believe they were 7-4, if I remember correctly. So the Bills, of course, taking on the Patriots in Foxborough. New England 6-5 coming off of a Thanksgiving night loss to the Minnesota Vikings. And the Bills are 8-3. Buffalo currently has a 72.1% 88% chance to win, according to ESPN Analytics' matchup predictor. Of course, as far as who is healthy and who is not, for the Bills, we know the Bills ruled out both Von Miller and Dion Dawkins today. Miller, of course, with a knee injury that was scaring plenty of folks. However, Von Miller said on his podcast that he is very optimistic that he can play through it, and he said he's played through something very similar to this before. He's optimistic that he can be back next week against the Jets, and that's what I've been telling myself and, by people around me who follow the Bills. I've been saying, listen, there's just so much we don't know about this injury. He could be back in 2 weeks. He could not be back for the rest of the year. We don't know. But definitely, I think things are probably trending in the right direction for Von Miller, which is just great news for Bills fans. As for Dawkins, he went down with an ankle injury on Thanksgiving against the Lions. He will not play tomorrow night against the Patriots. However, the rest of the injury report looks absolutely fantastic for the Bills. A few of their players were dealing with injuries. Those guys look like they are going to be ready to go. And Josh Allen's elbow looks good as well. Remember, he had that UCL sprain that he sustained against the Jets. And he definitely looks like he is going to be ready to go, which is honestly just phenomenal news, because the last couple of weeks, a lot of people have been noticing that maybe Josh's throws have been a little bit off, and that could have been affected by that UCL sprain. So I've got the injury report in front of me. Josh Allen was a full participant in practice. He has been all week. Dion Dawkins and Von Miller, as we know, are out. Tight end Quentin Morris is questionable for tomorrow night's game with an illness. A few other guys were down with illnesses as well. Damar Hamlin, Dane Jackson, Jaquan Johnson, and Khalil Shakir were all also out with illnesses. The Bills conducted a walkthrough practice today, but those four guys were all full participants in practice. Mitch Morse is looking like he will also be good to go. Jordan Phillips, Greg Rousseau, and AJ Epineza, as well as Tremaine Edmonds, all looking like they are going to be ready to go for Thursday night's game, which it gets me very excited. And my final thoughts, I guess, today are that this is a Bills team that is now they're now getting healthy. If they can get Dawkins and Miller back in a short amount of time, this is a almost fully healthy team, which they really haven't had all season. They haven't had all season. And we know Micah Hyde's out, but there was an article in The Athletic that was published about a week ago or so that Micah Hyde is optimistic that it is possible he could maybe return for the playoffs if all things continue to go well. The Bills also easing Tre'Davious White and Kaiir Elam back into a full workload. So my parting words for you, I want to make a prediction for tomorrow night's game. I think New England is a solid team. However, I do think that the Bills are going to take the win. I think Buffalo will beat the New England Patriots in a final score prediction. I'm gonna say 34-23. Buffalo beats New England by 11 points tomorrow night. That's my prediction. Buffalo 34, New England 23. That'll do it for us on another Wednesday of Big Blue Sports Talk. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, as well as everybody at Fredonia Radio Systems who makes this show possible. As always, I'm your host, Matt Volz. We'll be right back here next week to talk more Fredonia sports, Bills and Sabres. Everyone stay safe out there, stay warm, and stay dry for sure. We'll see you next week. Bye now.